What would you do if you suddenly couldn't understand a single word anyone said? Dropped into the vast, wind-swept expanse of the 13th century Mongol Empire, you'd be more than a stranger. You'd be a liability. Here, survival didn't come from comfort or cleverness. It came from obedience, endurance, and ruthless adaptation. The Mongols didn't suffer fools, and they had no use for outsiders who couldn't pull their weight. With a language you couldn't speak, a climate you couldn't endure, and a culture that punished weakness, how long would you last in the world of Genghis Khan? Lost in translation. The first barrier to survival. Your first and most immediate threat wouldn't be war or hunger. It would be silence. Not your own, but the silence that descends when you realize no one understands you. Mongolian, with its harsh consonants and clipped syntax, wouldn't just be difficult, it would be incomprehensible. Even if you tried to speak slowly, to gesture or draw, you'd likely be met with suspicion. In the Mongol world, miscommunication wasn't a minor hiccup, it was dangerous. The empire was multilingual, sure. Stretching from Korea to Hungary meant thousands of dialects. But Mongolian was the dominant tongue, the language of command, control, and survival. Without it, you couldn't follow orders, ask for food, or explain your intentions. And if you couldn't follow an order, even by accident, you'd be treated as a threat or a fool, neither of which lived long on the steppe. You'd also have no understanding of social cues. Mongols had precise customs around hospitality, honor, and hierarchy. Step on the threshold of a jur, grave insult, refuse food or drink, disrespect, speak out of turn, disobedience. Even a nervous laugh or awkward glance could be interpreted as arrogance or madness. And in a society that valued discipline above all, any sign of unpredictability could mean exile or execution. The Mongol sense of honor wasn't just personal, it was collective. An insult to one warrior was an insult to their entire clan. A gesture misunderstood by you could spark a fight, or worse, a blood feud. Missteps weren't forgiven because of ignorance. The Mongols believed in responsibility, not excuses. Without the ability to communicate, you'd be relegated to the lowest rung of society. You couldn't ask questions, make bargains, or explain yourself. You'd be a ghost in a land that demanded presence, clarity, and obedience. And the clock would start ticking the moment you opened your mouth, and nothing came out that they understood. The nomadic life. Constant motion, constant strain. If you somehow survived the first few encounters without offending someone fatally, you'd next face the Mongol way of life, a lifestyle that was mobile, minimal, and merciless. The Mongols didn't build cities. They lived in gurs, round, portable tents made from felt, wood, and hide. Families moved seasonally, following water and grazing lands. Everything you owned had to be movable. There were no closets, no storage sheds, and no wasted possessions. The weather would test you daily. In summer, the steppe baked under the relentless sun. In winter, temperatures plunged well below freezing, and the wind cut like knives. Clothing wasn't fashion, it was survival. Layers of wool, felt, and fur kept the cold out, but they were heavy, itchy, and smelled of livestock. You'd sleep in cramped spaces, often sharing your bed with siblings, grandparents, or animals. Personal space didn't exist. Privacy was a fantasy. You'd be expected to help from day one. No one got a pass. Children learned to ride by age 3. Boys trained in archery before they could read. Girls helped milk animals, prepare food, and pack jurs. You, with your modern skills and soft hands, would be seen as helpless, unless you proved otherwise. And fast. Tasks like herding, fire building, and water fetching were daily necessities, not chores. You'd walk miles to gather dung for fuel, skin animals with crude knives, and butcher meat by hand. A missed chore could lead to hunger, cold, or punishment. Slacking was not an option. Even travel was grueling. A day's ride might stretch over 30 to 40 miles. And if you couldn't keep up, too bad. The group wouldn't stop. You'd be expected to learn the hard way, through pain, exhaustion, and humiliation. Trade and survival on the Silk Road trade was vital to the Mongol Empire, and caravans crisscrossed the landscape carrying silk, spices, and tools. But merchants were under tight watch, and bandits were never far. As an outsider, you might be used as a packer, interpreter, or disposable guard. You'd be sent into dangerous territory with little protection. Fall behind? That's your problem. Mongols valued trade, but they also valued control. Caravan leaders needed permits and passes. You'd need someone to vouch for you, or risk being arrested as a spy. And with your strange clothes and strange speech, suspicion would follow you like a shadow. The Mongol diet: function over flavor. Food wouldn't kill you quickly, but it might kill your will to live. The Mongol diet was built for fuel, not taste. Forget fast food, fruit, or vegetables. You'd be living on a relentless loop of mutton, dried curds, and fermented mare's milk. Ayurag, fermented mare's milk, was the signature drink of the Mongol steppe. It smelled sour, tasted worse, and had a low alcohol content that made it both intoxicating and hydrating. It was offered to guests as a sign of respect. Refuse it, and you insulted your host. Choke on it, and you embarrassed yourself. It wasn't just a drink, it was a test. Meals were simple: dried meat, borts, animal fat, broth, and hard cheese. On rare occasions, if you were near a trading hub or traveling with a merchant caravan, you might taste millet porridge or rice. But vegetables were rare. Fruit, a luxury. Sugar, virtually unknown. There were no utensils. You ate with your hands or used your knife. Cleanliness was minimal, and meat was sometimes only half-cooked. Food poisoning wasn't a maybe, it was a frequent visitor. And with no modern medicine, even a stomach bug could mean death. But the bigger danger wasn't the food itself. It was what happened if you didn't eat. Refusing food was disrespectful. Complaining about it? Even worse. You couldn't ask for alternatives. There were none. Your ability to smile, nod, and choke down fermented fat might determine whether you were accepted or thrown out into the cold. The warrior machine. Total mobilization. The Mongol military wasn't just a fighting force, it was a way of life. Every man was a soldier. Every family was part of the war machine. If you were male and able-bodied, you'd be expected to serve. If you were female, you weren't spared. Women maintained jurs, raised warriors, tended herds, and even fought when needed. You'd be given a bow, a horse, and a quota. Learn to ride and shoot, or be trampled in drills. You wouldn't be trained gently. The Mongols didn't believe in coddling. Pain was part of learning. You'd be bruised, bloodied, and exhausted, and you'd be expected to keep going. Their war strategy was revolutionary: speed, mobility, and deception. Small bands of horse archers could destroy armies 10 times their size. You'd learn to shoot while riding, to sleep in the saddle, and to survive on scraps for days. A single mistake, breaking formation, slowing down, showing fear, could doom the entire unit. Discipline was absolute. Horses were sacred, essential partners in battle. You'd ride small but powerful Mongol steeds, trained to respond to the slightest nudge. You'd drink their blood in emergencies. You'd share warmth with them in winter. Losing a horse was like losing your weapon and your life. The code of war was harsh. Looting without permission meant death. Disobedience meant execution. The Yasa law code was rigid, and it didn't allow for misunderstanding. You wouldn't get a second chance. You'd barely get a first. The justice of the Khan's law in the Mongol Empire was clear, absolute, and brutally enforced. Genghis Khan's Yasa covered everything from theft to hygiene, and it was enforced across a 1,000,000 square mile empire. Steal a horse? Death. Lie to a commander? Death. Disrespect a shaman? Death. The Mongols believed that disorder killed empires, and they would rather kill an individual than let disorder fester. There were no jails. Punishment was immediate: public executions, exile, or severe beatings. As an outsider, you'd be expected to follow the rules immediately. There was no grace period. You couldn't plead ignorance. If you accidentally offended a noble or crossed into a sacred area, You wouldn't get a warning, you'd get a spear in your gut. Even seemingly small acts could carry big consequences. Killing animals improperly, wasting fire, or stepping into the wrong part of a jeer could provoke outrage. The Mongols lived by ritual. You broke those rituals at your peril. Disease, dirt, and the price of ignorance medical care in the Mongol Empire was primitive but surprisingly advanced in some areas. Shamans performed healing rites, and Chinese, Persian, and Arab doctors were often employed by the elite. But for commoners, most illnesses went untreated. Clean water was rare, sanitation was basic. You'd bathe maybe once a month and only with melted snow or heated river water. Lice were constant companions. Boils, fevers, toothaches, normal. You'd stink, you'd itch, and no one would care. If you got sick, there were no antibiotics. A fever could turn deadly. A scratch could become sepsis. Diarrhea, dehydration. You'd be expected to keep working through the pain. There were no days off. Weakness was an offense to the group. And if your illness risked the community, you might be cast out. Not with malice, but with necessity. The Mongol world didn't have time for sympathy. It had space only for survivors. Religion and the realm of the spirits. The Mongol Empire was famously tolerant of religion, but that didn't mean you could do or say anything you liked. The Mongols themselves practiced Tengrism, a spiritual belief centered around sky gods, ancestors, and the sacredness of nature. You'd be expected to respect holy sites, participate in rituals, and keep quiet during ceremonies. Laugh at a shaman? You might be beaten. Refuse to bow to the sacred fire? You could be cursed. Or worse. Religion, on the other hand, can be able to provide you with some degree of safety if you are able to demonstrate respect and rapidly learn it. Shamans of the Mongols were thought to have played a significant role in the development of their civilization throughout the course of their history. According to a common belief, if someone acquired feelings of fondness for you, or had dreams that involved you, it is possible that you could earn acceptance through spiritual ways. This is a possibility. The likelihood of you being approved would increase as a result of this information. Your chances of being successful would increase if something similar were to occur, as this would increase the likelihood that you would be successful. It was not absolutely out of the question that it may take place, despite the fact that it was an extraordinarily uncommon occurrence indeed. In the event that you were to survive, do you believe that you would be able to make it through it? Now that you have a complete understanding of the scenario, your question is whether or not you would be able to survive in the Mongol Empire. Have you ever considered whether or not you would be able to survive if you were to live under the Mongol Empire? The following are some of the experiences that you would be required to go through. Adjusting to a nomadic lifestyle, learning a new language, adhering to a strict legal code, consuming cuisine that is foreign to you, serving in an army that is extremely disciplined, enduring violent weather, and possibly riding into battle on a horse that is half wild, while carrying nothing but a bow and raw meat in your pouch. A great number of additional experiences come to memory, but these are only a few of the ones that come to mind. You would not only be subjected to a lack of communication, but you would also be subjected to suspicion, disease, and the ongoing requirement to establish your value. All of these things would be taken into consideration. You would be exposed to each and every one of these concerns. You would come across each and every one of these objects while you were taking part in your excursion. Having characteristics such as charisma was not something that could be relied upon in any way, shape, or form. It would be impossible to employ technology as a measure of protection given the specific nature of the scenario that we are currently in. There are two possible outcomes. Either you would make a concerted effort to bring your attention back to the activity at hand, or you would fail to appear. Nevertheless, there is a possibility that you will be able to make it through this traumatic experience. There is a chance that you should not disregard at this point. If you are able to show that you are helpful, humble, and resilient, there is a possibility that the Mongols will find a place for you in their society. This is the case if you are able to demonstrate that you are both of these things. In the event that you are successful in achieving this goal, you will have a better chance of getting admitted into the program. Strongness was the quality that they admired the most in a person, and they admired it the greatest. One of the many things that they placed a great value on was loyalty, which was also one of the things that they valued beyond everything else. They believed that a skill of this size was deserving of attention and discussion because of its magnitude. Should you continue to suffer from illness on your own, you ought to go away from the situation. In order to avoid being found, it is essential to make an effort to avoid being found. One must always bear in mind that during the whole of the Mongol Empire, the opportunity to live without interruption was not a right, but rather a luxury. This is something that must be kept in mind at all times. It is something that should be done on a consistent basis, and that is with the intention of always keeping this in mind. To show our appreciation, we would appreciate it if you would click the subscribe button and then leave a comment below, letting us know which empire you think we ought to investigate next. The voyage that we took inside the empire of Genghis Khan was not only educational, but also fascinating, and we would be delighted if you would take us on this excursion. I am not only grateful for your attention, but also for the time you have taken.